Welcome back to Listography. Joe here with Jason and Kramzer as always, and we are counting down our top albums of the year. We're in the thick of the 90s now. We're past the beginning of grunge. 93 is sort of the start of the Britpop era. Wouldn't really fully bloom until 94 and then 95, of course, with Oasis versus Blur, the big rivalry there. But 93 had a lot of sort of the beginnings. Blur had released their second album. Suede had the fastest selling debut by a UK artist in chart history in the UK. In the United States, we had a bunch of crappy albums amongst the top 10. You had The Bodyguard was the number one album of the year. Number two, Breathless by Kenny G. Number three, Unplugged, Eric Clapton with his big kind of comeback. And you had Janet at number four, Some Gave All by Billy Ray Cyrus at number five. So, the charts were still kind of dominated by this kind of crappy pop songs. But you did have some grunge on there. You had 10, Core from STP, still selling well all the way into 93. What else? You had Michael Jackson's Super Bowl performance, which is kind of a big deal. That was the first year that they kind of got a huge star, and it started a trend that continues to this day as sort of a spotlight performance, a big deal for the artists to play the Super Bowl. You had Rick Astley retiring from music, very big deal there. The number one song in America, Meatloaf, I Would Do Anything for Love, from his comeback album, Bad Outta Hell 2. And a couple of deaths. You had Mick Ronson, Conway Twitty, and Frank Zappa all passed away in 93. That's pretty much it. I don't think anything else happened in 93 that we need to talk about. So let's dive right into the albums.
Is that Clapton album you mentioned, the one with Tears in Heaven and all that on it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, if people watched the Hall of Fame video and were annoyed by our lack of Doobie Brothers enthusiasm, wait till me and or Jason talk about Eric Clapton as a whole. It might not be the most pleasant thing in the world. So,
well, where I lack enthusiasm for the Doobie Brothers, I have Extra for 1993. I love this year. It's got two albums that are pretty solid contenders for my top 10 albums of all time. And in terms of depth, I don't think there's really been a year that goes this deep since the early 70s for me. I mean, I think there were probably 30 records that I considered for the top five. Tons and tons of good stuff. I won't list all of them, but a few that are missing out are Siamese Dream by the Smashing Pumpkins. You've got Pablo Honey by Radiohead, of course. Mezcal Head by Swerve Driver. Just lots of good stuff. In the end, I came down to three that are essentially a tie for my number five spot. The ones that I'm not going to put graphics on the screen for are You Gonna Go My Way by Lenny Kravitz, which is probably better than Mama Said, but that album made my top five in 91. This one misses out because it's a stronger year, but it's really, really good. And Gentleman by the Afghan Wigs, very close to making my list. But all right, now the top five. The runner-up that is essentially tied with Gentleman and Are You Gonna Go My Way, but the one that gets put on the screen is Transmissions from the Satellite Heart by Flaming Lips. For me, this is sort of where the Flaming Lips find themselves. I think it's their first really great record. I've also got 13 by Teenage Fan Club. Really strong follow-up to the excellent Bandwagon-esque. I think it's great. I've also got Anodyne by Uncle Tupelo, their major label debut and also their final album. I think it's their best album. Really good stuff. And then, of course, the top two, as I alluded to, two of my favorite albums of all time.
We know what they are.
You both know what they are. Runner-up, almost unbelievable that this has to be a runner-up. It's August and Everything After. I love the Counting Crows. I think they're one of the best bands of the 90s. Excellent songwriting. I just think it's great. I got this album when I was in like fourth or fifth grade or something. Might be one of my most listened to albums of all time. It's been in constant rotation basically since then. So love it. But it's got a record even better in this year that outdoes it. I've got Where You Been by Dinosaur Jr. I I didn't have this record when it came out. I got this probably in like 97. And it was the first Dinosaur Jr. record that I got into. And it really just kind of changed everything for me. This was like a year before I stopped taking piano lessons and started teaching myself guitar. Hugely influential to me as far as my taste in music goes. I think, everybody talks about the guitar when they talk about Dinosaur Jr. Jay is a great guitar player. His guitar sound is very iconic and great, but I think often overlooked is the songwriting and the vocals. I think the songs on this record are great, and even though his vocal delivery is sometimes maybe a little, I don't know, lackadaisical or lazy sounding to some, I think they're incredibly emotional at the same time. And I just love everything about this record. I think it sounds great. The playing's great. The songs are great. Not a bad note on it. I absolutely love it.
When we did Bob Dylan Week, the side 3 video, Unconventional Singers, and we were talking about Jay Mascis a good bit, and I understand the criticism of his vocals, but they don't bother me at all. I think it fits perfectly. So I'm with Jason. 93 is loaded. I'm not ready to declare 90s better than the 70s, and I won't. But the 90s are particularly beholden to my heart. Grow up, listen to all that stuff. When you get into college, you really get into the underground stuff, and it's great. And I've got, just as many stuff from 93, stuff that's not going to make it. Couple things that Jason had, The Flaming Lips, Teenage Fan Club 13. I like Bjork's debut. Good EP from Babes in Toyland called Painkillers. Verses by Pearl Jam not making it. Siamese Dream by the Pumpkins not making it. Painful by Yo La Tengo not making it. Pablo Honey by Radiohead not making it. It's probably the only Radiohead album that won't make it per their existence. Coverdale Page wasn't going to make top 5, but worth a note. I like it a good bit. Both Red House Painters 1 and 2 for me. I kind of like Candlebox's debut. There's a lot of good stuff. Everybody else is doing it, so why aren't we? By Cranberries. Tribe Called Quest's Midnight Marauders. All right, I can go on and on and on. Here's what I got as my runners-up. I've got In Utero by Nirvana, which I like a little bit more than Nevermind, actually. I know there's a small group of us in the world that consider that. Nevermind's great, but I like In Utero a little bit more. I've got Where You Been by Dinosaur Jr. as a runner-up. Rid of Me by PJ Harvey, probably the best album in that discography. And then it came down to 2, but the more I whittled through it throughout the last couple weeks, the winner became pretty clear, like a 55 to 45 sort of percentage point. Runner-up is going to be Souvlaki by Slowdive, maybe my favorite shoegaze album of all time, but my winner, the songwriting's just too damn good, on August, and Everything After by Counting Crows. And I don't even know if this is my favorite Counting Crows record. I love the Counting Crows, kind of have a weird relationship with them. I don't like them nearly as much as Jason does. Few people on earth do, but, I love them. They're a little bit too, they're not a depressing band, maybe a little bit in a sense, but you definitely have to be in a certain mood to listen to them most of the time. And so I don't listen to them very often, but when I do, it really hits the spot and blows me away. We were texting a couple weeks ago and kind of infighting on our group text about some of the small problems we have with this album, mine being the weird middle section, the funkiness and Round Here, which I think kind of ruins the mood. And the song Omaha isn't my favorite on the album, but other than that, I think that every sort of decision and piece of writing on this is awesome. Mr. Jones is the big hit. Murder of One is awesome. Sullivan Street, Rain King, time and time again. And because of Jason's campaign and lobbying when we first got to know each other 15, 20 years ago or whatever it was, used to say that Anna Begins was one of the best written songs of all time. And I agree by this point in my life. It's fantastic. A lot of really underscored playing throughout the group in this. Obviously, Adam Duritz is the star of the show here. His sort of, sad-struck, sappy vocals is, everything that the 90s and the idea of like rain and coffee shops and, being single and dating kind of bring up these images, and he is it. But the band is really exceptional here. You really got to kind of listen to it to pay attention to, especially some of the accents that the drumming is doing, some of the little bass touches, really great. Yeah, I think this album is spectacular all the way through. I don't dislike Omaha. It's my least favorite on it, but it's an incredible record. It's incredibly well written, really indicative of the times too, like I'm saying. And on a side note, I love all the studio albums of Counting Crows. And one of the only bands that go down a peg for me because of their live stuff. Don't like their live albums and really didn't like seeing them live. The motherfucker came out in like a stained t-shirt and sweatpants, and I was just like, you know, I dropped a lot of money in this. Maybe just throw in a damn shirt and not change the lyrics to every song. I know some diehards like that, but I was like, come on, dude. But the studio albums are great. This one, maybe my favorite, but a good bit my favorite for 1993. Counting Crows, August, and everything after.
Well, I never thought I'd see the day where Kramzer has a Counting Crows album ahead of where Jason had it. That kind of blew my mind. Thought for sure Jason would. I mean, I guess the Dinosaur Jr. kind of, that's going to win out, but I did not see that coming from you, Kramzer. I didn't realize you liked that so much.
How not? We were in Canada together listening to that album, I believe, like 15 years ago.
Well,
or no, Recovering the Satellites. It was Recovering the Satellites, I remember.
See, after you bashed them live, and I still remember that, and you talked about how you didn't like Omaha, I didn't think they were going to take the top spot, but that's interesting. It's a good pick. It also is on my list, and it's funny because Omaha might be my favorite song, and the funk break in Round Here is probably my favorite part of the whole album. So it's interesting that we can have such, you know, diverse opinions on it, but still hold it in high regard because it does come in my top 5. Also on my list, I got Radiohead's debut, Pablo Honey, and which I love. Really, if you took off a couple songs, you know, they didn't have the slow kind of songs down yet. I think there's a couple that could have been trimmed and it would have been maybe a number 1 album for me in 93. I really do love Pablo Honey. Also on my list, I have Versus from Pearl Jam. Probably my favorite Pearl Jam. It's close with 10. And then the top 2 are real tough for me. Historically, one was sort of an obvious choice because I've had it, you know, I bought the album a long time ago. The other one's sort of a new trendy thing for me that I've listened to more in the past 2 years than any other album, bar none. Before I get into that, a couple ones that just didn't quite make it. Doggy Style from Snoop Dogg, maybe my favorite rap album of all time. I just really like Snoop Dogg for some reason. Production from Dr. Dre, fantastic. I like sort of the West Coast sound, the funk, the big bass. Billy Joel's River of Dreams, which isn't that great. It's an okay album. I do respect it very much because he retired from pop music. This was his last pop album, and he never went back. He never kind of threw together some, 20 years later, crappy little album. He said it was going to be his final one. His final song, his famous last words. Lots of respect for Billy Joel there for sort of not going back on that. And, I do like Suede's debut, Manic Street Preachers, Gold Dance of Soul. I like sort of the start of the Britpop, but it's not quite there for me yet. Maybe next year or the year after. But all right, back to the top 2. This was tough. My runner-up is going to be Siamese Dream from Smashing Pumpkins. Historically, this has been, I thought it was going to be the winner, but I've been listening to it for a decade or two now. Billy Corgan, underrated rock god, Geek USA, just phenomenal guitar work. Just the walls and walls of guitar. But if I'm being true to myself, and got to give a shout out to Kev Truth in our comment section, he called it. Number 1's going to be Spilt Milk from Jellyfish. I think it's a lot better than Belly Button. Belly Button I like plenty, but it sort of won because it was in 1990, and I didn't really have anything else to put there. And this one's just better in every way. Andy Sturmer and Roger Manning sort of, on the Belly Button, they were really into the Beatles and Cheap Trick. And in this one, they just sort of went all out. There's Brian Wilson, Beach Boys homages, especially on Hush. It's just as much power pop as you possibly could kind of stuff into one album is in this one. They sort of go all out on the production, the little touches and flourishes. The vocal harmonies are some of the best since the Beach Boys, honestly. It's phenomenal. They kicked out the drummer and the bassist and sort of just, they were just wanted full control to make the album that they wanted. And I sort of miss maybe that conflicting opinion. They maybe could have used a producer that sort of said no to some of this, because maybe a couple times they go a little too far. But what they do, it reminds me of Brian Wilson and sort of after Pet Sounds, sort of when Brian Wilson went crazy, started adding in the sound of people eating vegetables and stuff like that. It's just sort of everything at the wall. The songwriting's great. New Mistake goes to number 1, are really just good pop songs. They put in some Queen in Joining a Fan Club. So they kind of expand their sound, really just make it as full and glorious as possible. And if you've been paying attention through my years, I love that big kind of over-the-top sound. And they really nail it on this one. Their last album, sadly, because Andy Sturmer went on, and it kind of makes sense, he went on to produce tracks for Puffy Amiyumi, Japanese pop band, and now he writes songs for Disney Channel kids shows. So you can kind of hear that in here. It's a lot of sort of that very playfulness. So unfortunately, I never got to see them live or anything else. They'll never get back together, so it's sad. But a very good lasting legacy from Jellyfish on Spilt Milk. So
awesome. Wow. I feel like this was the most fascinating year for us as a trio and for the channel. Joe already pointed out the weird similarities but differences in our taste in August. I feel the same way about Pablo Honey. My favorite song on it is Thinking About You, which is a slow song. Also, probably the only instance of Joe having Radiohead and not me. So kind of crazy, and so many good albums. I agree with Jason. I glossed over a couple that I was contending with. Get a Grip, maybe my favorite post-70s Aerosmith album, and So Tonight That I Might See by Mazzy Star was maybe going to get the 5 spot for a bit. Jason, I felt like this was one of the most predictable years, not in a bad way, but I think I would have guessed at least 4 of those 5 for you. So, but we're kind of getting into where we know each other the most in that category.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like in the early 90s, a lot of my favorite bands just are on that 2-year cycle. And it seems like every other year, it's like the same lineup of my top 5. Because you got Dinosaur Jr. returning, Teenage Fan Club returning. Yeah, you see a lot of the same bands over and over again for me in the 90s.
All right, well, that was 1993. It really, it doesn't get, there's no downturn in 94. These middle 90s are pretty darn good, but you'll just have to wait and see what we pick for those. If you like the video, give us a like, leave your top 5 for 93 or top 10 or 25, or some of you people just get real crazy in the comments, which we love to see. Subscribe to the channel, check out our profile for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for Kramzer and Jason. This was Listography. Favorite albums of the year, 1993. We'll see you next time.